Hello Army, welcome back to the channel, and if you are new here, welcome, because today we have something that is going to stop you in your tracks, and I mean that in the most literal possible sense. What we are about to discuss is not a chart record. It is not a streaming milestone. It is not a fashion campaign or a concert attendance figure or any of the conventional markers of success in the music industry. Today we are talking about something that exists in a completely different dimension of recognition, the dimension of literary and cultural legitimacy, of being acknowledged not by the entertainment industry but by the world of serious artistic criticism. We are talking about Lim Hyun-young, an 85-year-old Korean literary critic and the director of the National Museum of Korean Literature, who watched the BTS Gwangwamun concert on television and then said, clearly and without qualification, that BTS fully deserves to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. And the specific thing that moved him to say that was a song that Jimin has made his own in a way that goes beyond performance into something deeper and more personal. We are talking about Spring Day. So get comfortable, because this is a story that deserves every word we are about to give it. Let me begin by properly introducing Lim Hyun-young, because the weight of what he said depends entirely on understanding who he is and what his opinion represents in the landscape of Korean literary culture. Lim Hyun-young is not a casual observer. He is not a pop culture commentator or a social media personality or someone who encountered BTS through a recommendation algorithm and decided to share his thoughts. He is a literary critic who has spent his entire professional life, more than 6 decades, working at the highest levels of Korean literary scholarship. His career spans a period of Korean literature that includes some of the most significant and most challenging chapters in the nation's modern history, and he has been a witness to, and a participant in, the conversations that have defined how Korean literature understands itself and presents itself to the world. He has served as the director of the National Museum of Korean Literature, which is the institution responsible for preserving and promoting the heritage of Korean literary culture. His opinion on questions of literary merit is not casual. It carries the full weight of a lifetime of serious engagement with what literature is and what it can do. When a person like this watches a BTS concert and says that their work fully deserves Nobel Prize consideration, it is not a fan moment. It is a critical judgment made by someone with the intellectual tools and the professional standing to make it meaningfully. And the specific terms in which he made the judgment are worth examining carefully, because they reveal something important about what he heard and what moved him. Lim Hyun-young said that he was captivated by Spring Day. He described the poetry of the lyrics, not the song, not the performance, not the production, but the lyrics specifically, framed as poetry. And then he said something that stopped everyone who heard it cold. He said that in the history of human literature, no one has ever written poetry like this. No one. In the history of human literature. Those words, coming from an 85-year-old scholar who has spent his entire life immersed in that history, are not hyperbole. They are a considered and deliberate statement by someone who has spent more time thinking about the history of human literary expression than most people spend thinking about anything. Now let's talk about Spring Day specifically, because to understand why this song moved a literary critic to Nobel Prize statements, you need to understand what Spring Day actually is as a piece of language, as a piece of emotional communication, as a piece of art that exists in the world and does things to the people who encounter it. Spring Day was released in February 2017 as part of BTS's You Never Walk Alone project, and from the moment it appeared it was recognized as something different from what even BTS had produced before. The song is, on the surface, about longing, the ache of missing someone who is gone, the specific texture of waiting for something or someone to return that you know and some part of yourself may never return. It uses the image of a changing season, the transition from winter to spring, as both a literal and metaphorical framework for talking about loss and the complicated relationship between grief and hope. But what Lim Hyun-young was responding to when he spoke about the poetry of the lyrics is something more specific than the emotional subject matter, which is the actual quality of the language, the precision and the compression and the specific images that the song uses to do its emotional work. Spring Day is a song that achieves what the very best lyric poetry achieves, which is to find the exact words for something that most people have felt but could not name. The image of a worn sweater carrying the scent of someone who is gone. The paradox of wishing for winter to stay because the cold feels closer to the person you are missing. The specific loneliness of a person standing on a train platform watching the world move past while they remain still. These are not generic emotional placeholders. These are precise and specific observations about human experience, and the precision is the poetry. Jimin's relationship with Spring Day is one that ARMY has watched and documented and cherished for years, and it adds another dimension to the story of Lim Hyun-young's response. Jimin has always performed Spring Day with a quality of personal investment that goes beyond professional commitment. There are multiple instances, well documented in fan footage across many years of concerts and performances, of Jimin becoming visibly emotional during Spring Day, sometimes fighting tears, sometimes allowing them, always bringing a quality of genuine personal feeling to the performance that communicates something about his own relationship with the themes of the song. This is not performed vulnerability. This is someone for whom the emotional content of this specific song consistently reaches something real and personal, and the audiences who watch him perform it feel that realness. The Gwanghwamun concert, which took place on March 21st and was broadcast on television for those who could not attend in person, was the event that brought Lim Hyun-young to BTS and specifically to Spring Day. He was watching at home, a retired scholar in his 80s with no particular prior investment in K-pop, and what he encountered when he watched was evidently something that broke through whatever preconceptions or distance a person of his background and generation might have brought to a pop music concert. The choreography, the staging, the production values, all of these might have been expected and processed as entertainment. But the language of Spring Day was something he could not process in entertainment terms, because his life's work had given him a very specific sensitivity to what language can do, and what he heard in Spring Day exceeded what he had heard before. His comment that no one in the history of human literature has written poetry like this requires some unpacking, because taken literally it is an enormous claim that invites challenge and scrutiny. Lim Hyun-young was not saying that Spring Day is technically superior to every poem ever written, or that BTS as lyricist surpasses Homer or Shakespeare or Pablo Neruda or every other writer who has ever used language to reach for transcendence. What he was saying, and this is worth understanding precisely, is that the specific combination of elements in Spring Day, the specific way that this particular piece of language communicates this particular quality of human feeling, has no exact precedent in his experience of the literary tradition. He had not encountered this before. This specific thing, whatever it is that Spring Day does and how it does it, was new to him. And for someone who has spent 85 years reading and studying and thinking about literature, encountering something genuinely new is not a small experience. Let's think about what makes a piece of popular music worthy of serious literary consideration, because this question is actually quite interesting and quite contested in the worlds of both music criticism and literary scholarship. The Nobel Prize in Literature was famously awarded to Bob Dylan in 2016, and that decision generated significant debate precisely because it forced the literary establishment to either defend or reconsider the traditional boundaries of what counted as literature. Dylan won, the Swedish Academy stated at the time, for having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition. The argument was that the distinction between song lyric and poem is not a categorical distinction but a historical one, that throughout most of human history, poetry was sung, and that the artificiality of treating written poems as a higher art form than sung ones reflects relatively recent cultural conventions rather than any intrinsic difference in the capacity of the two forms to achieve literary depth and emotional resonance. In this context, Lim Hyun-young's Nobel Prize statement about BTS is not as extraordinary as it might initially sound. It is the same argument applied to a different body of work, the argument that the song lyric as a form is capable of achieving literary significance, that the quality of what BTS has written in songs like Spring Day meets the standards that we apply to literature, and that the institutional distinctions between pop music and literature should not prevent us from recognizing genuine achievement wherever it exists. What makes his statement remarkable is not its logical structure, which is defensible, but who is making it and in what context. An 85-year-old Korean literary scholar, director of the National Museum of Korean Literature, who encountered BTS for the first time through a television broadcast and was moved to make this statement by what he heard. Now let's talk about the broader cultural significance of this moment, because Lim Hyun-young's comment did not exist in isolation. The article in Hankook Ilbo, published on May 8, 2026, brought his statement to a mainstream Korean audience, and the response was significant. In Korea specifically, the idea of BTS's work being discussed in the context of serious literary merit is not entirely new. There has been a growing body of academic attention to BTS's lyrics and their engagement with Korean literary and philosophical traditions over the last several years. But having a figure of Lim Hyun-young's specific standing and generation make this statement publicly, through a mainstream newspaper, is different from academic discussion. It is a statement that travels across generational and cultural boundaries in ways that academic papers do not. For Korean Army specifically, the response to Lim Hyun-young's comments has been deeply emotional. There is a specific and very understandable feeling that comes from seeing the artistic merit of something you love recognized by someone who had no prior reason to love it, recognized not through the mechanisms of fan culture but through the mechanisms of serious critical engagement. It is the satisfaction of knowing that what you have always felt was real and significant is real and significant in ways that extend beyond the fan community, that register in the broader cultural conversation, that reach people who come to the work without the context of fandom and still find it extraordinary. For International Army, for the fans in America, in Indonesia, in Brazil, in every country where BTS has found a passionate and devoted community, the Lim Hyun-young statement is a kind of validation that connects to something even more personal. Because one of the consistent experiences of being an international army is being asked to justify your investment in BTS, to explain why this matters, to defend the idea that what this group produces is genuinely extraordinary rather than just commercially successful. And having an 85-year-old Korean literary scholar say that in the history of human literature no one has written poetry like this is a very specific and very powerful piece of evidence that what you have always felt was true. Let's return to Jimin specifically, because his connection to this story goes beyond having performed Spring Day at the concert that Lim Hyun-young watched. Jimin has always been the member of BTS who most visibly and most consistently communicates the emotional depth of the music he performs. His relationship with the material is never merely technical. He does not perform songs, he inhabits them, which means that the literary and emotional content of what he sings is always present and always felt in what he does on stage. When Lim Hyun-young watched the Gwangwamun concert and was moved to say what he said, he was watching Jimin perform. He was experiencing the specific quality of emotion and presence that Jimin brings to material that is already, in its written form, exceptional. The combination of exceptional writing and exceptional performance created the experience that moved this scholar to Nobel Prize statements. This is actually a very important point about how literature and performance intersect. A poem on a page can be read and appreciated intellectually. But literature in its oldest form was always performed, spoken aloud, sung, delivered by a human body to a human audience in real time. The lyric poem is a form that was originally designed to be sung. As its name tells us, lyric comes from lyre, the instrument that accompanied sung poetry in ancient Greece. When Jimin performs Spring Day, he is not illustrating a text. He is completing it. He is doing what the form was designed for. And the effect that this completion creates in an attentive audience, including a retired literary scholar watching on television, is the full realization of what the work was capable of. Lim Hyun-young's statement should be understood in this full context. He was not simply responding to lyrics that he had read in a book. He was responding to lyrics performed with everything Jimin brings to a performance, the voice, the body, the emotional investment, the specific quality of presence that makes watching him perform Spring Day an experience that cannot be reproduced by any other means. The literary merit he recognized is real and it is in the words. But the experience of that merit was mediated through performance, and the performance was Jimin's. As we look at the full picture of what this moment represents, it is worth pausing to appreciate the journey that has led here. BTS began as a group that the Korean music industry did not expect to succeed, signed to a small company, pursuing a musical and artistic vision that did not fit neatly into the commercial formulas that were generating success in 2013. They built their audience through work, through the quality of the music, through the honesty of the lyrics, through the extraordinary commitment of the performances, through a willingness to engage with emotional and social content that mainstream pop music often avoids. And that audience grew to a size and a depth of engagement that is genuinely unprecedented in music history. And now, in 2026, an 85-year-old man who spent his life dedicated to Korean literature watched a television broadcast of a BTS concert and said that the poetry he heard in Spring Day has no precedent in the history of human literary expression. The work that began in a small company with a group of young men who just wanted to make honest music has reached a place where it is being held up against the entire tradition of human literature and found to be genuinely, distinctively extraordinary. That is the story. And Jimin, who has performed Spring Day more times than can be counted, who has made the emotional content of that song available to audiences in ways that go beyond what any recording can capture, is at the center of it in a very specific and very meaningful way. The literary critic was moved by the poetry. But he encountered that poetry through Jimin's voice, Jimin's body, Jimin's irreplaceable and completely personal commitment to every note of that song. And that connection between the written word and the human voice that brings it fully to life is what Lim Hyun-young was really talking about when he said that no one in the history of human literature has written poetry like this. He was right. And ARMY has known it for years. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. It genuinely helps the channel reach more people who need to hear this story. Drop a comment below telling me your personal relationship with Spring Day, when you first heard it, what it means to you, and whether Lim Hyun-young's statement captures something you have always felt about it. Subscribe if you have not already, share this with your fellow ARMY, and I will see you in the next one. Purple you all.